Good day to you IELTS students and welcome back to another episode of the IELTS Plus English podcast. And today we're going to talk about study. Well, this has to be an area that I'm comfortable talking about. I don't study myself much nowadays, but I'm certainly helping plenty of students with their studies. So I thought, we're talking about study. Let me give you some study tips. So this is, of course, it's specific to the IELTS test. And I just want to give you, I have lots of tips and it depends on the student, but I'm going to give you 3 tips that I think every IELTS student should be following to prepare for the IELTS exam. And this is focused on speaking, just because this podcast is focused on speaking. So I've just prepared a few tips I want to give you. Number 1, when it comes to, I think a lot of students like to focus on vocabulary because it feels like you learn vocabulary and it goes into your head, you start using it. There's a very clear process of achievement that you know when you've learnt vocabulary because then you're able to use it. So people like to develop their vocabulary. That's great. What I want to say to you, the tip 1 is be picky. Do not just take on any vocabulary you see around you. That's so important. The reason it's important is you'll take on all this vocabulary, but because there's so much, you will default to your basic vocabulary in your head when you're speaking. So to give you an example of this, with my student nowadays, a particular guy who's working on his IELTS, he tried to take on so much, and I just noticed it wasn't coming out in his answers at all. So I said, okay, pick 3 general use, high-level vocabulary. And you've heard me talk about this so many times, like a word like consequently. Pick 3 and make sure they come out in your next mock test or your next practice. And then next week, we'll do another 3. And I tell you what, once you've got 10 or 20 of this vocabulary that's seen as high level, but you can use them in every topic, your speaking will be transformed. So be picky with your vocabulary. Next tip is to benchmark. Now, there's a number of ways you can do this. I would say to you, if you are, let's say, you're aiming for a band 7 or a band 6.5, I think there's a lot of people doing that, band 6, band 7. I don't think you should be benchmarking band 9. I don't think you should be watching loads of band 9 tests and trying to follow them and take on all of their language. I think you should be benchmarking the level that you are aiming for. So for most people, I would say find band 7 mock tests on YouTube and watch them and just see what patterns are they using. How are they better than you? What mistakes are they making? Analyze them and take on what you feel is good language and good strategies. I do like benchmarking. I think it works in every aspect of study. And it links to the first tip, because when you're benchmarking, do be picky with the language that you're taking on. Final tip, tip 3, is I'd like you, if you're not doing this is very important, to record yourself doing mock tests or simply answering questions the same as I do. I want to do this. I want you to do this for a few reasons. And ideally, I'd like you to video it, not just audio record. The reason I want you to do this is I want you to see your demeanor. How are you? Are you hunched? Are you very quiet and shy? Are you, open and good posture and speaking well? That's very important. And then use the benchmarking from part 2, tip 2, and compare yourself. Where am I better than them? Where am I worse than them? What are my weaknesses? You need to get the examiner's perspective of your English. That's really important to understand yourself so that you can continue your development and know more about your strengths and weaknesses. So that's it. 3 tips. Number 1, be picky with your language. Number 2, benchmark. Number 3, record yourself, ideally video. So I've said a lot. Let's move on and let's get into today's topic, study. Part 1, question 1. What are you currently studying? I am currently studying, well, I'd say I'm currently studying health and fitness. Now, that doesn't sound like something you study necessarily, but I do have a program with my personal trainer. I am studying how to use equipment, how to have a better diet, the correct exercises to do for certain parts of the body. So I think I can call that studying. Next question, do you prefer to study alone or with others? I think I prefer to study alone. I've tried things like study groups, and I wasn't a big fan because I just get distracted. I like talking. And if I'm in a study group, I'd quite like to have a chat. So I think the best thing for me is to isolate myself and to work alone and really have deep concentration by myself. Good. Okay, let's do part 2. So let's get my 2 minutes ready. Today's part 2 is describe a study technique that works well for you. Okay. Well, I'll be honest. I'll tell you my exact study method today. This is not for IELTS. This is just me. This is when I have to study something. This is what I use. So I will talk about that. Okay. My time starts now. I'd like to tell you about the one-page method. In 2012, I started going to university. And I think during those 4 years in university, I really worked on my study technique. I tried to learn ways of studying. I experimented with various methods. There are so many methods online, but I came across this technique, the one-page method, I'll call it. And it worked perfectly for me. And from that point on, that's how I always study. So let me tell you a little more about the one-page method. This is where, let's say, for example, you have a textbook and you need to revise this textbook. You start by, of course, reading the textbook and then condensing it down to however many pages you need to. So let's say a whole textbook, you might condense it down to 10 to 15 pages. And then once you're happy with that, you put the textbook aside, you don't need that anymore. And you have your 10 to 15 pages and you condense that down to maybe 2 or 3. Same process again, you put those 10 to 15 pages aside, and now those 2 to 3 pages, your goal is to condense it down to 1 page. Now, through this, you are comprehending the language or the content better. You're revising, and it becomes this 1 page where you understand everything. And that 1 page is enough to remember the entire textbook. Now, you can do anything you want with that page. You can turn it into flashcards or anything like that. But for me, it was just, I needed that page. And on exam day, I would bring that with me. Okay. I should explain there, because if I say on exam day, I bring that 1 page with me, it sounds like I'm going to cheat. What I was going to say was I bring it with me. I sit outside before the exam, go back over, really try to picture that whole page, and then, of course, chuck it out and go into the exam. Just to clarify, it's very important. So, yeah, that's my method. How about you? And actually, I didn't ask you a student question, so let's make that our student question today. What's your study method? How do you study? I've told you mine, the 1-page method. How about you? How do you study for anything? Excellent. Let's go to part 3. And part 3, question 1. How can students manage their time effectively when studying? I think that students really have to be disciplined, and they have to make sure, well, they have to find their way of studying. I think that's the most important thing, because what I noticed is that some people are really good at studying sort of 30 minutes, take a break, 30 minutes, take a break. That's terrible for me. I need to do 3-hour sessions and then take a more significant break. And so I like to do 2 or 3 3-hour sessions a day. When there's exam season, it would be 3 probably. So students have to find their way of studying. And as I said, they do have to be disciplined, and they have to make sure that they are studying in the way that they need to, whether that means in a study group or alone. They have to make sure that they are in the right environment for managing their time effectively, not letting it be managed by others. Okay, not a great answer there. I didn't love that. I think I was a little bit mixed around with ideas. So let's try and do better on this one. Next question. Do you think there is too much pressure on students to study hard? Yeah, I think I don't know. It depends on the country. But certainly on the whole, there is a lot of pressure. Students get a lot of assignments. Particularly, it's awful when it's exam season and you're still getting assignments, or assignments are due. I think during exam season, you should be entirely focused on revising and getting ready for an exam that tests your semester or whatever it is. Here in Korea, absolutely, I can say that there's too much pressure. I think it depends on the age, but you see high school students they really suffer from stress during their final exam season. It's an awful time. There's a lot of competition and too much pressure to get into university. Okay, that was a better answer. Very clear structure. I was happy with that one. Much more, direct and to the point. Last question. How has the way students study changed over the years? I would say that the best way to answer this is to talk about technology. In the past, of course, there wasn't the kind of technology we have today. Just 10 years ago, there was still we were primarily using pen and paper. Whereas nowadays, I can see maybe the majority of students have iPads. I myself use an iPad, and I think that's allowing us to organize things better and to use certain softwares to assist us. It's easier to make flashcards. So mostly we've gone from pen and paper to technology, and that's having an enormous effect. I think the next step we're seeing, and I haven't seen this in terms of study so much, but in university, but certainly there must be a lot of use of AI nowadays, and that's helping us summarize and collect things together and get explanations. So AI must be having a huge effect on study. Well, I think that was a longer episode. If you made it this far, well done. I really appreciate it, and I hope that this episode had some value for you in thinking about your own ways of studying. Next week is much easier. I'm just looking here. It's television. Now, I don't know about you. I'm not a massive fan of TV, but I've certainly watched plenty, and I've got lots I can talk about, so I'm looking forward to that. So study incredibly hard this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week to talk about television.